So let's talk about Miss Aretha Franklin. Y'all, her love life was just as captivating as her music. Simply put, it was filled with passion, heartbreak, and resilience. From her tumultuous first marriage to Ted White, to her media-friendly union with actor Glynn Turman, to her quieter romances with Cunningham and Willie Wilkerson, and even some of her crushes. Each relationship brought its own lessons and influences on the music she gave to the world. And soon, I'll tell you all about it, including those rumors too. Welcome to another episode of I'll Tell You What, a podcast that's all love Black history. I'm Ashley, your favorite raconteuse that brings you these stories every Monday. So go ahead and hit subscribe, follow everywhere, share everywhere, and join us on Patreon to show your support and show your love. So to understand Aretha as a person and her love life, we must reflect first on where and how it all began with her parents. Aretha Franklin was the way that she was because of two people, her mama, Barbara Siggers, and her daddy, Clarence LaVon Franklin, who most knew as Reverend C.L. Franklin. So, do you remember what you were doing and how mature you were when you were 21 years old? Well, think about that, because when C.L. Franklin was 21, he got married for the second time to Barbara, who already had a child named Vaughn. By the time Aretha was born, her parents had 3 children together. According to the David Ritz biography on Aretha's life, in 1940, so we're thinking her dad was about 25 years old, he cheated on his wife, so Aretha's mom, with a 12-year-old and got her pregnant. But let Aretha tell it, her parents had the perfect marriage. So maybe, just maybe, that's what she wanted to believe. So that's what she projected to the world. Also, allegedly, but not surprisingly, her dad's infidelity caused problems in his marriage. CL's reputation in the Baptist community wasn't just for his sermon. It was also for his charm, which extended beyond the pulpit. And if I can remember, the great Monique Samuels had a phrase for pastors like that. Aretha's sister Irma, when talking about their mom, said, quote, "She worked as a nurse's aide, and even though daddy had a good salary from the church, I felt that she wanted to be independent." She went on to say how her siblings noticed how the women of the church would fawn over him and he would just eat it up. So it was assumed that was the reason why Barbara left CL and their 4 children and moved to Buffalo, New York with her oldest. Or at least that was just one of the reasons. Who knows? I mean, his charm allured many women throughout the years, including Marvin Gaye's ex-wife and Berry Gordy's sister, Anna. She said, quote, "I felt he was the most dynamic man in the city. The man was a poet and a healer." So, Barbara would see her kids occasionally, and Aretha's siblings felt like Aretha was deeply affected by not being physically close to their mom. That plus the fact that their dad had a temper, so she probably longed for that tenderness that you get from your mama. But a canon event would occur when Aretha was 10 years old. Her mom, at the very young age of 34, died of a heart attack. It was so sudden and nobody was prepared for this. Aretha wrote that her father just sat them down, told them the horrible news, and that was that. Afterwards, various women would be in and out of CL's life, which naturally also meant the lives of his children too. All these potential mamas kept coming in and out of their lives, and that heartbreak would just keep occurring over and over and over. So that's what Aretha dealt with as a child. Her parents' separation, her mother's absence, and then her mom's untimely death, her dad's promiscuity, and the various women coming in to temporarily fill that hole just because they were interested in CL. I believe our upbringings influence our relationships. And so as I share more with you, you may understand a little bit better why Aretha was the way she was, but I don't know. So with that being said though, can you say that you're surprised to learn that she became pregnant at the age of 13? Aretha Franklin had her first child at the age of 13 and her second child at the age of 15. Her booking agent, Ruth Bowen, said, quote, Aretha couldn't wait to become a woman. That's what the elders would call being grown. But truthfully, around the time of these pregnancies, Aretha was performing around the country with her father. The human is so nosy by nature, so these pregnancies led to the rumor that her dad was the one that impregnated her. Aretha's siblings confided to biographer David Ritz, the ghostwriter of her biography, that was absolutely not the case. And after Aretha passed away, it was actually revealed that the father was this man named Edward Jordan. After she had her second child, she dropped out of school. At that point, her career had started to take off as she was a popular attraction as her father went around the country. So while she was traveling, her grandmother, Big Mama, would raise her boys for her. So being on the road and generally outside is how she came in contact with Ted White, the man that would become her first husband. Well, actually, she first saw him when she was a child carrying, quote, a drunk Dinah Washington out of her father's living room. Ted White was this smooth-talking, sharp-dressed Detroit businessman. But others said he was actually a pimp. And he had that kind of charm that could talk his way into any room and apparently into Aretha's heart. Etta James said, quote, when I learned that Aretha married him, I wasn't surprised. A lot of big-time singers who we idolized as girls, like Billie Holiday and Sarah Vaughan, had pimps for boyfriends and managers. So by 1961, when Aretha was 18, they were married and Ted was managing Aretha's career. On the outside looking in, it seemed like they were a power couple. Ted encouraged Aretha to embrace secular music and lean into the blues and soul sounds. But her daddy didn't like that. And he definitely didn't like the fact that she had started to sing in the clubs. However, it didn't matter. Ted was in control. Irma, Aretha's sister, said, quote, when Ted took over, the man took over. Anyone who had previously been involved in Aretha's career, including her own father, was marginalized. But here's where things get a little tricky. Ted wasn't just managing her career, he was managing her. From the beginning, there were signs that their relationship wasn't as glamorous as it seemed. It would become more obvious in the years and months to come, however. Aretha's husband, Ted, was no stranger to controversy. Not only was he managing her career, he had a reputation for being controlling, and people close to Aretha were concerned. Her sister, Irma, once said that Ted had a temper and didn't hesitate to let it show. And while Aretha was young and in love, she was also caught in a dynamic where Ted held a lot of the power. Now, their marriage became a constant battle between love and control. Ted's role as her manager gave him a level of influence over her career that wasn't healthy. You already have this power dynamic here, but Aretha was going from like one father figure to a father-like figure, and this one is the one she's actually romantically involved with, and that, of course, made for a very toxic situation. However, Aretha wasn't a lay down and take it kind of woman, and Ted knew that, and that would piss him TF off. In the biography Respect, her brother Cecil mentioned a time when her father asked her to perform for Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and Ted wanted her to sing at this club instead. She took the job for Dr. King, and that pissed him off. Over time, folks in the industry would whisper about his behavior, and there were times when his actions caused tension with the people Aretha worked with. Songwriter and producer Clyde Otis noticed how Ted would take credit for bankrolling her career, while the general assumption is that he was the one living off of her. He was also showing up to her sessions and gigs drunk and contentious AF. There was a time when he got into a fight with the studio owner for no reason as Aretha was recording and basically made her storm out with him. Oh, and after Aretha had their son, Jet magazine wrote that Ted wanted her to stay at home with their kid and stop working. Now, let's be for real here. If she would have stopped working, how would he have made any money? Anyway, she didn't, obviously and thankfully, and he denied the notion that he wanted her to do so, but truthfully, that rumor must have come from somewhere. Not only that, there were these rumors of his infidelity and physical abuse towards Aretha. It's assumed that her song Respect was how she felt about Ted. But as her brother Cecil mentioned, quote, he kept slapping her around and didn't care who saw him do it. It is important to note that in this time, her career was starting to recover from sort of a stalemate. That pressure on her from the label didn't make things any easier between Ted and her, which likely contributed to her trying to cope with food and alcohol. And as she gained weight, Jet and Ebony would write all about it, which I'm sure just continued to add to all of the pressures that she faced. But Aretha loved the presentation of being desired and envied. Her sister-in-law believed that was one of the reasons why it took until 1968 for them to separate. Quote, she wanted the world to think she had a storybook marriage. She hates to admit being wrong, that she'd chosen the wrong man to share her life and manage her career. Rather than admit that, she'll go on living with the mistake longer than she needs to. So they would divorce the following year in 1969, and Aretha would begin to make changes. She dropped Ted as her manager and let her brother Cecil come in, and she started to date again. Now, Ted wasn't one to just let the divorce be the divorce. No, he was trying to stay around. One time, Sam Cooke's brother Charles was staying at Aretha's house, and Ted, who had barely been at this house since their divorce, showed up and shot him in the groin. This obviously put a very sour taste in Aretha's mouth regarding marriage, and though she was very hesitant with men moving forward, she would find solace in a man named Ken Cunningham. So after the end of her marriage to Ted White, Ken Cunningham came into Aretha Franklin's life in the early 1970s. And honestly, he was a breath of fresh air. Ken wasn't from the world of music, nor was he from Hollywood. No, he was just this calm, steady presence who seemed to give Aretha some much needed peace. Like, finally, someone who didn't want something from her and just let her be. Now, granted, when they met, Ken was married, but Aretha swore that the marriage was over, so, we'll just have to believe that. So, regardless, he was good for her, according to Aretha's cousin. He got her to stop drinking, and he was someone everyone in Aretha's circle liked as well. So, though they weren't married, they were serious enough to have a child together, yes. They had a little boy named Kelf Cunningham, spelled Kecalf. And fun fact, his name is actually an acronym for Ken E. Cunningham, Aretha Louise Franklin. The more you know. Now, their relationship didn't have the same public highs and lows as her marriage to Ted. Ken wasn't out here trying to control her, nor was he really trying to mooch off her success. So she enjoyed that, obviously. During this time, time, she wasn't just committed to Ken, though. She was also dating a man named Dennis Edwards. But apparently, quote, Cunningham was not threatened by her friendships with other men. But as with most things in Aretha's life, this love story didn't last. By the late 1970s, they had gone their separate ways. Their speculation into their relationship began when he was absent when her father received an award that year. Perhaps it was because he did slowly start to insert himself into her professional affairs. Who knows, y'all? But still, their time together seemed to leave her in a good place. Ken gave her something different, something she probably needed at that point in her life. But just months, like literally just not even half a year after they broke up, she'd meet the man that would become her second husband, actor Glynn Turman. In January 1967, Aretha met her next husband. Now, she didn't meet him through her manager nor another celebrity, but through her son. While attending a benefit concert, her son Clarence sees Glynn Turman and runs up to him, telling him, "My mommy just loves you." Then, Glynn was best known at the time for his role in Cooley High. He didn't know Aretha personally, but as fate would have it, they struck up a conversation and he invited her to one of his acting classes. Their first date was in July of that year to attend a Billy Davis and Marilyn McCoo show. And from there, it was history. They began to date, and then he proposed while filming the miniseries Charlie Smith in Texas. I assume she was skeptical of his interest in her deep down, especially based off her previous relationships. But it wasn't just her. Ebony magazine inquired if Glynn was marrying Aretha because he was on the rise and she was a more established name. Aretha told them in so many words, no. Quote, "We both love and like each other, and the like part is very important too." Before they got married, Aretha gave him a prenuptial agreement to sign. Allegedly, he didn't sign it at first. He said he misplaced it. They sent him another one, and it literally took minutes before the ceremony before it was returned signed. So on April 11th, 1978, they were married in a private ceremony at Aretha's father's church, New Bethel Baptist in Detroit. Jet magazine described Aretha's beautiful wedding dress. It was, quote, created by Black designer Ruth West of Los Angeles and, quote, was in eggshell silk appliques with lace and encrusted with 17,500 seed pearls and was trimmed in mink. It had a detachable 7-foot train and a matching hat. The gown was estimated to cost $10,000 then, which would be shy of $50,000 today. Aretha and Glynn had 10 groomsmen and 10 bridesmaids in their wedding party, including some of their children. Lou Gossett Jr., rest in peace, was Glynn's best man. They hosted 2 receptions, one in Detroit and another in Los Angeles. At the Los Angeles reception, they ate, quote, filet mignon, shrimp, various Moroccan foods, fresh strawberries, and champagne. Now, one of the things that made Aretha and Glynn's relationship special was their shared love of family. Glynn became a stepfather to Aretha's sons, and Aretha embraced Glynn's children from his previous marriage. Aretha told Ebony magazine that they have, quote, just one big, happy, loving family. Everybody gets along just fine. But the fact that they would keep having to tell the public that everything in their marriage would be okay despite her being a bigger celebrity than he was would possibly foreshadow what was to come. The following year, Aretha's father was shot in a robbery. He survived, yet would remain in a coma for 5 years. This would eventually add to the strain that developed in their marriage, and Aretha decided to move from Los Angeles and back to Detroit to be closer to her father and the rest of her family. By 1984, after 6 years of marriage, Aretha and Glynn decided to part ways. Their divorce was amicable, and both would speak very highly of each other in the years that followed. When Aretha was on her deathbed, Glynn came to see her and they shared a sweet moment. And even still, he calls her a quote, love of his life. But y'all know, Aretha would find love again, as she always did. Oh, Aretha Franklin, the queen of soul, didn't just have a voice that could move mountains, she also had a love life that could fill a novel. Now let's talk about the highs and the lows and the in-betweens of her romances and marriages, starting with Ted White. Oh, Ted White. Now, Ted was her first husband and manager. They married in 1961 when she was like 18 or 19, and while he helped her transition into the bluesy, soulful sound that made her famous, their relationship was very rocky. Ted was known for being controlling, and their marriage was filled with conflict, both private and public. By 1969, Aretha had enough and divorced him, but that experience left a mark, shaping some of her most emotionally raw songs and even, truthfully, how she thought about marriage. Fast forward to 1978, and Aretha walked down the aisle again, this time to Glynn Turman, the actor best known then for Cooley High. They were a glamorous couple, blending together music and Hollywood. And for a while, it seemed like Aretha had found her balance. Glynn became a stepfather to her children, and she was a stepmom to his, and they seemed genuinely happy. But life in the spotlight, along with the challenges balancing two very demanding careers, led to their divorce in 1984. And yeah, I'm pretty sure you heard those very nasty rumors about Glynn and Aretha's son, but there's absolutely nothing to substantiate any of that. Still, Glynn remained a gentleman about their time together, always speaking very fondly of Aretha. You probably knew about those first two men, but maybe not so much about Ken Cunningham, who was in a quieter chapter in Aretha's life. They never got married, but they had a meaningful relationship, and during their time together, they welcomed Aretha's youngest son, Calf. Ken was different from her previous partners. He wasn't in the spotlight, nor was he trying to control her. Also, he was fine with her dating other guys at the same time. So he was this steady presence, allowing Aretha the space to just be herself. Her family and friends loved them together, especially because he came into her life after her marriage to Ted ended. And then there was Willie Wilkerson. They almost got married when Aretha was in her late 60s. The wedding was planned and the media discussed the possibility of Aretha walking down the aisle again, but it was called off. Even without the wedding, Willie was a rock for Aretha in her later years, proving that love doesn't always need a marriage license to be real. Oh, and we can't forget her little crush on Tavis Smiley. Yeah. In the biography Respect, David Ritz wrote about how Aretha kept hinting to the media that she was going to marry this media personality that a lot of folks were familiar with. She kept on for years, alluding to the evolution of this relationship that was to this secret yet not so secret person. And yeah, eventually that would just end too. But as you can see, Aretha's love life was as soulful and complex as her music. She loved deeply, experienced heartbreak like we all do, and the world benefited from those experiences, especially when they were infused into her art. So that, Aisle Runners, concludes the love story on Aretha Franklin. To learn more about Aretha, I would really suggest that you read her biography, but also read the biography about her written by David Ritz called Respect. Tell me your thoughts on Aretha and her love story. I'm curious to just know how you feel. And, don't forget to subscribe, review, share, do all the things. And season 4 of I'll Tell You What is starting in January. So I will see y'all in the pews.